Welcome, guys. It's good to see you, Kim.
Good to see you too. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
All I could hear was Andrew talking, and I was like, wait, really? Like, I'm not hearing Mark.
Oh yeah, I forgot to unmute myself again in Discord.
Yeah.
We
We're
were
we're trying
literally
to
just talking
like,
about that.
yeah, we're trying to figure out all these weird little traps that we fall into, like with the audio. Um, yeah, but it's what we get for trying to do it on both sides, I guess. But it's all right. All right. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. It's already a few minutes after 8. So, um, yeah, we're gonna, since it's kind of a smaller group, I'm thinking we'll just, I was telling Mark a second ago, we can just kind of keep it pretty conversational, but we are gonna still do the recording side and post this later and stuff on YouTube. So the goal of tonight is just kind of to talk about ways to level up, time management, stay productive, stay active in the whole creating music consistently side of things and stuff like that. So I'll kind of just jump right in because I could probably talk about this quite a bit. And I don't want it to just be like going through a bunch of points because I could very easily do that real quickly. And like I said, I'd love to keep it more conversational if possible. But these are just some of the things that I have found personally. And I know Mark can chime in on a few things specifically. There's going to be a few things on here that I think he could speak to better than myself for sure. But for anyone that's watching or for you guys that are here on the Zoom call, just I personally have only been in sync for about probably close to 4 years now. I think, yeah, it's just at the 4 year mark or something. Um, and I started out thinking that it was like um a race to the finish, and my whole mindset has changed. Now it's a long term, like this is just something that there's going to be moments where things are moving quickly and going fast and things are being cranked out, and and you're accomplishing a lot, and then there's other times where it just feels like it's not moving like it should be, and you get frustrated because you're not getting the tracks out as quickly as you'd like to and stuff. So but yeah, so I kind of said that as a preface to all of this. Like, there's going to be moments in this, kind of journey where you see like things just going well, and it just feels like everything's clicking, and you're seeing placements and you're seeing deals and new opportunities. And then there's other times where it's just like, oh God, make this happen. Like, I'm trying so hard, and it's a struggle. So let that be an encouragement, regardless of whatever you're in the middle of, as far as like figuring out how to make time to do stuff like this. Just think long term, it definitely helps. So the first one, number one for 8 ways to level up your time management game and stay productive, is to up your awareness of where your time is actually going. So um the first thing that came to mind when I think about like this kind of stuff is my mom actually made me, when I was a teenager, she made me do this crazy budgeting system with envelopes where you got all your money and you put your money into different envelopes. And you could only, whatever was written on the envelope, that's all you could use that money for, right? So she was trying to teach us to budget. And I didn't learn that very well. But what I did get from that is that, like, when you know exactly where your, in this case, money is going, it helps you have a better idea of where you're spending, and I think the same thing kind of applies with time, right? So one of the things that I did probably a few years ago is I started listing out my day, like literally tracking how much time I did doing different things. And I started seeing moments where like I could probably like shave this a little bit, or like a little bit less, Stranger Things, more, time down in the studio and stuff like that. And keeping track of that really helped, kind of open my eyes. It doesn't give you more hours in the day, but it just at least helps you recognize a little bit where your time is being spent. I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids. I'm a husband. I work a full-time job and a part-time job on top of the sync stuff. So it's definitely a juggling act. But when I'm able to really take a step back and look at all that stuff, it definitely helps. So yeah. And I think the other side of this is that, like, you can get creative once you know where your time is going. You can start getting really creative with how you work on your stuff. So, like, for me, one of the things that I had to start doing was listening and brainstorming to stuff in the car, like when I was taking my kids to school and stuff like that. Like, I'd have track ideas and things that I just like have on my phone, and I'd hit play while my kids are in the car, and they're listening and thinking like, Dad, what is this is not like an actual, this is weird, like this is not the music we normally listen to. But I'd be playing stuff just to like get the kind of the wheels moving a little bit, so that when I had the time to be in the studio, I already had the mental kind of process going, and everything is kind of already in the right place and kind of just ready to be jumped into, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's definitely something that I still do, and I have to consistently do, because everybody's life changes too. There's always things that priorities change and stuff like that. So before I jump to the next one, anything you want to chime in on that, Mark?
No. Can you hear me? All good.
Gotcha.
Perfect. Just trying to manage audio on both sides, trying to make sure I get it squared away.
Yep.
Yeah, the first thing that stuck out was the budgeting, the envelope system. I mean, I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, so I mean that goes like
there you go.
many other ways as well. But yeah, as far as like awareness is key, and I mean there's a lot of different ways you can approach it and a lot of different things you can do. I've tried like the bullet journal method. I've tried like a productivity planner. I mean, you just kind of got to try different ways until you figure out what works for you. But then in addition to being aware, and hopefully I'm not jumping ahead too far, but
Nope, go for it.
in awareness to time, also like awareness what's best for you. So like I fell into that whole trap of like, oh, everyone who's successful gets up at 4 a.m. So that's what I'm gonna do. And like I did that for like 3 years straight, and like it worked. But then like I'm a natural night owl. My wife is an extreme night owl, so it's like still trying to do that. It doesn't work. So like also being aware of like what time of day works best for you in your life and your circumstances. And I can see Tasha kind of chiming in the chat with that too. Like, I mean, some of us have businesses or day jobs and trying to do the outside of it. Like just, yeah, self-awareness is key first and foremost in many different senses.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it's about like finding what works for you. I've done the exact same thing. I've done the 4 o'clock like work 2.5 hours, 3 hours before my kids wake up, and then just go about my day. And then of course by like 9:30 or 10, I'm like dead to the world at the same time my kids are. So that, I mean, that works. And actually I use that method when I'm like up against a hard deadline. That's kind of my go-to thing, is I'll do the real early stuff. And then when I'm not, I will work later in the evenings and stuff. So I kind of jump around with that too. But yeah, it's a personal thing. Everybody's got to kind of find what works for them. There's no like, this is the solution, to your time management sort of thing. You gotta really just figure out what works. So the other thing is, in this side of things, is that like, I think it's important to not sleep on little windows of time, right? So Chuck Schlacker, I think I said his name right, from the taxi community, he did a workshop like in 2019, the last rally before the pandemic. And I remember he talked about this. He said, if you've got 15-20 minutes, and you can either sit there and flip, through social media or whatever for 15-20 minutes, if you can not do that and literally just go sit at your computer, pull something up and take a small amount, you just work on one small thing and just get somewhere with it, then you're already going to be that much farther along, next time you actually do have time to sit down at the, in your studio room or whatever. So don't miss out on those. Social media for me is like a huge, like, I have a love-hate relationship with it, because it's like you just get sucked in so easily, and next thing you know, 3 hours, there it goes. So that's definitely something that is worth considering, you know, when you've got little opportunities, even if it's just 15-20 minutes, it's worth trying to just sit down and do something. So the next one on the list, number 2, is prioritize and reprioritize. I kind of actually talked a little bit about this on a write-up I did for Taxi a few years back, but the whole idea is that, like, if you know your priorities really, really well, it's going to help you find a sustainable balance with creating music. So early on, I was like not good at figuring out what took priority. So, and I very quickly realized, you know, like, okay, I'm not going to sacrifice family time for music stuff, right? Like, I mean, as much as I want to see this happen and I want to, like, you know, be the guy that works really hard and see some early success, there was things that I had to real quickly evaluate and say, okay, I'm not gonna let go of this in order to make this happen. So that again, for everybody, is personal. You've got to figure out, in my life, what is the most, you know, important thing for me that I make sure I'm spending time on and is non-negotiable, you know? And then the way I kind of like to think about it is that, like, you know, if you've got plates spinning, right? I don't know if anybody, like, there's really old, it's way before my time, but I've seen videos of, like, performers spinning plates on sticks, right? And the idea is they've got like 15 plates all spinning at the same time, and they run from plate to plate and keep them moving. So some of those plates you can't ignore, right? Some of those plates you've got to keep moving no matter what. Other plates you can kind of let start to wobble a little bit. Like, it sounds, you know, like for me, if I'm consistently going to the gym or something like that, but then I've got a really important opportunity music wise with some very short deadlines, that's a plate that I'll let, like, wobble for a while. I'll just, you know, not go to the gym, or I'll let that go for a while, you know, in order to prioritize something else and make sure that that is getting the time instead of one of those lesser priority things and stuff like that. So yeah, so it's kind of, I guess, just you know, the idea is being very aware, like I said, of what takes precedent and what doesn't. Because if you start to sacrifice the wrong things for making music, it will come back to bite you. Like, it's eventually gonna catch up to you, and it's gonna ultimately hurt you long term in regards to productivity in music as a whole. So I'm gonna just kind of keep roll. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, great points. The things that sort of made me think of this one book. I keep, like, I read it a few years ago, but I've heard like probably a dozen people in the last couple weeks recommend it. So I'm like, okay, I probably need to go back and check this book out again. But it's a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Have you read that?
I have not.
Basically the same concept. Fantastic book. I remember it had a huge impact on me then, and I just kind of probably need to go re-reference it. But I mean, it is that, it's just finding like the things that are the most important. I think the subtext of the book was like the subtle art of less, or the pursued path of less, or something. But yeah, it's really just focusing in on sort of like what is the most essential things and like what will have the most impact. The other thing I wrote down, I don't know if you follow Alex Hermosi at all. He's kind of like a business guru, but he talks about leverage a lot. And so that's kind of like how I like to think about even how I spend my time with music. When you're talking about like prioritize and reprioritize, if you look at all the things you have to do, like which ones will have the like greatest leverage for you, your career, like getting you to where you want to be. It's like, I mean, I could work on sound design, I could work on some tension drones, I could work on my outreach, I could work on my production skills, but like what of those things is going to have the highest leverage? That meaning, you know, like of all the things you could do, which of those is going to have like the most outsized outputs for the inputs that you put in, if that makes sense. And not that everything has to be like business related, but like I could spend a few hours making tension drones, or I could work on like a trailer track, and just kind of seeing where you want to go. And then, yeah, like you said, prioritize what you want to do. And like you, I'm never going to put music as much as I can over family time. I mean, you have to make some sacrifices, of course, but like there's a certain amount of like life is short, you know, like you gotta prioritize for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's great. Like what you said, as far as, you know, having a good knowledge of not just like what is important as far as the balance between, like, you know, music and other things, but like even within the music itself. Right. So like whether it's putting stuff out there on social media, building a better website, the emails, the networking, the connecting with people, that's all part of it, right? It's not just making music. You got to stay up to date with your connections and the people that you do know. Make sure that you're investing the time that you need to and all that stuff. So there is a lot to think about that, and that's a great way to approach it, is just saying what's the best bang for the buck, with my time, sort of thing. What's going to leverage out long term. So one of the things that in regards to this that kind of helped me early on that I wanted to share is I can't remember where this actually came from, somewhere within Taxi, but it's just the mindset change that when I first started, it was like something that I was like kind of interested in doing sync. And then I, sent some emails out and said to different people asking about it, saying, should I do this? Should I not do it? And eventually I got to the point where I was kind of like all in on it. Like I knew it was going to be something that I really dove into. But I remember having a talk with my wife and actually saying, hey, this is not going to pay me money at all for a while, but I want to treat it like a job. Like, and it was kind of a weird conversation because basically I wanted to understand, like I wanted to treat it as if a job, knowing full well that the investment would come back around if I were to stick with it and stuff. So, which, I mean, to be honest, at that point, I didn't totally know that, because it's weird when you get into sync and you think Taxi, or you think, all these things. It's scary. You're investing all this time and you don't even know if it's actually going to be worth it long term. But like, honestly, like just being real transparent here, I definitely saw, like, just this last year, the largest amount of income that I'd seen, my entire time doing sync, by a huge amount. So it's well past not past my income of my full-time, but well past the income of my other part-time jobs. So and I only see that continuing to grow as long as I'm able to keep, finding opportunities and ways to prioritize that and stuff. But so treating it like a job early on, even though it's not, I think is a good mindset to have, and trying to, for my wife, as I'll just kind of like brag about her for a second. She had to step up, like on her side, and like do more of the like putting kids to bed and stuff like that, while she knew I was working really hard, because she knew it was something I was taking seriously. So if you are in a situation with a partner or somebody like that can help you with that stuff, it might be worth having that conversation and saying, hey, I want to take this, pretty seriously and treat it like a job. So yeah, just one other way to kind of keep that priority thing in balance. So, all right, moving on. Number 3, work on your workflow. I definitely want to let Mark chime in a little bit. He was mentioning a little bit about in the Discord just recently reworking some of his templates. So workflow being like how you actually go about your musical, creation and production process, right? Like all the things that go into that, figuring out how it works best for you, whether you're a writer, top liner, producer, composer, any of those things. Everybody's got a method of going through all the steps that they take in order to accomplish what they're seeking to accomplish, right? And that can be focused on and worked on till it's very precise and just works well for you. So Mark, tell us a little bit about your templates and what you use.
Sure. So I use Logic. First and foremost, I use Logic Pro. Not that that's a huge thing, but yeah, as far as templates go, I used to make a bunch of different templates for different things. Like I would have like underscore drama template. I'd have a future based template, hip hop tension template. And I just had this realization. It's like, why don't I just make one template that has everything I use, and I can just sort of delete stuff when I don't need it? Because even before I like knew what templates were a thing, another guy that I follow a lot is Tim Ferriss. If you know who that is.
Mm-mm.
But he has this like mental game he plays, and that's kind of where I got the idea. And like when he's approaching something that's like really hard, like some big milestone that's like challenging, or he doesn't know how he's going to approach it, he just asks himself like, what would this look like if it were easy? And so like I asked myself that one day, like, because I couldn't make enough music. Like in the time I had after my day job, I was working overtime, was working 6 days a week, yada yada. I was just like, well, what would this look like if it was easy? Like, well, I'd pull up Logic, everything would already be loaded, and I'd just make music and send it off. I'm like, oh, I wonder if you can do that. Like, I didn't even know templates were a thing. And so I finally figured it out. And yeah, my template now has like 600 tracks. It's super color coded. Everything's organized. Everything's in instrument folders. All my like reverb and delay sends are already set up. So basically, I open Logic. Any instrument I could ever need is right there, organized. And I have most of my instruments hidden. And so when I pull it up, it's not like a mess with 600 tracks. It's like my piano, my main drums folder, the strings I always use. So it's like super simple. And then I can just like show my hidden folders. But essentially, I can open that up, create music instantly, bounce it, export it. And then when it comes time for alts and like submixes, like all the instruments are already grouped together. So like if I need to do a cappella, I just solo the vocal folder. If I need to do like drums and bass, I solo the drums and bass folder. Like everything's already organized and ready to go. Sample rates there. I mean, yeah, it's just a super, super efficient way to work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably even like based on the type of producer and the types of things that you're creating, there's probably even different types of templates that work for you. I remember seeing a video from Jesse from what is his on YouTube?
Sync my music.
Yes, Sync My Music. He was actually saying, and this kind of blew my mind. His template is like he'll create a project and actually have 2 or 3 tracks that he's building within the same project. And like he'll go through that way, he has all the same stuff all loaded up. And like he's just playing one of his tracks, you know, it sounds great or whatever. He gets to end it, and there's like a spot, you space, and then it goes right into the next track. I'm like, what is it? Like, why did I never think of that? You know? So, I mean, if you're on a like serious time crunch and you need the exact same sound palette, you know, you might as well do stuff like that, or at least try it, you know, experiment with it. Because ultimately, like, I hate to say it, but like sync is about like how quickly you can create, you know, high quality music. You've got to be able to crank that stuff out in a way that makes sense long term. If you're spending a week or two on one sync track, you know, that's like an underscore thing, then it's kind of like you're going to be working for a really long time to get your library up to, or your, you know, catalog up to the point of being something that helps make money. So yeah, so you got to just kind of find what works for you. But the template thing is definitely, I think, a great idea. Another thing that sometimes I like to do, I don't always do this, but it definitely helps me at certain points, is like the different hats approach. So like having, you know, like the creative hat, you put that on, you're just in creative mode, you're going through sound design, getting everything kind of set up, ready to go for the next stage, right? And then when you're done with that, you go on to the writing or the composing, or, you know, and then you take that hat off, and then you put on your mixing hat. So I like to blur the lines here and there on this one, but it definitely has helped me in certain scenarios where I've had to like, especially, well, I'll say this one has helped me most in stuff that I'm brand new to. So like starting a brand new genre or something that I've never done before. This helps me kind of keep my brain organized a little bit as far as what needs to happen. So I can stay more focused. Once I get really into a genre, like if it's something I've done a lot, I can blur the lines on this one quite a bit, and it doesn't really mess with me too much because I just have an idea already of what needs to happen. You know, from the start or whatever. But so yeah, that's another approach to try. Another big thing is having a plan when you sit down, not just kind of sitting down and hoping that the stars align and like, you know, inspiration strikes just when you do it. If you come in knowing what you're going to do, kind of like what I was saying earlier about like listening to stuff in the car, already getting a good idea. Even like I've made my kids listen to reference tracks from, you know, libraries on, you know, websites and stuff like that. You know, they're listening to these, you know, random things, and they don't know the difference. I guess, you know, I try to explain to them, well, this is for daddy to listen to so he can make music that's kind of like it, so hopefully he can get paid. But yeah, so it's just another way to, you know, to have a game plan going in so that you're kind of ready to go and are in that mindset when you do sit down and stuff. So, and the last thing about this one, unless Mark, you want to chime in on any of this stuff, I was going to say that, you know, like we said, that workflow for everybody is just a little different. So ultimately you got to find what works for you. And the only way to do that is just to experiment, try new stuff out, try things out, look for new ways to do things, figure out, what would help. Just like Mark said, look and say, ideally, like what would make this just extremely easy, and then start experimenting, try to find ways to make that happen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, like having a goal or a plan too, it's just, I mean, it's an overused phrase, but begin with the end in mind. I mean, it makes things so easy. And on your point about reference tracks too, I did that like when I was first starting. I had this one publisher who would like send out the reference tracks. And so I remember like I still had an iPod at that time. It's like I had put that on a playlist on repeat on my iPod and just like duplicate it in the playlist. So I had it like 400 times in a row. And I just like, that's all I listened to the entire day for like a week. So I was like, before I had any placements, like I was just still trying to figure it out. So I was like, I'm just going to listen to this reference track like on a loop until I can like nail it.
So if somebody were to talk to you and you were just feeling really tense, is that after like listening to 400 tension drones like in a row or something? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it sounds crazy, but like, it's the things that, ultimately those little things will kind of help get you where you need to be just a little bit quicker. And you start making a bunch of good, small decisions. They all cumulatively kind of add up to helping you out long term. So, awesome. All right. So number 4 is collaborate. This kind of sounds a little backwards, and actually it can at times be counterproductive. I don't know if that's the right word, but the idea is that like when you collaborate, at least for me, I've noticed that it really helps with motivation to stay on target with stuff, right? So if it's just me working on a track, it can at times be easy to just be like, I'm not feeling this anymore. Just kind of let it sit or find other things to kind of work on and stuff like that. But when you're working with somebody, I was just talking before we actually started the video here about a collaboration that I'm working on with Kim, and I feel bad because I haven't had the time to do it, but that's actually kind of the point. Like that's what makes collaboration great, is like you feel like a responsibility because you're working with somebody, and that is a motivating factor. So it can really help keep you on the ball as long as you're the type of person that knows like that you're willing to value the other person's time, in a way that motivates you. So definitely worth trying out. Like I said, the downside, I guess, to this is while you're figuring out your workflow, it can be slower. Like you can fall into a place of like back and forth. And I've had that plenty of times with collaborators, but I can say that I've always come away with like being able to evaluate myself in a little bit clearer, I think, perspective on the things that maybe were small hangups for me that probably shouldn't have been, or things that like I could adjust on my end in order to make myself kind of easier to work with, and also ultimately just faster in general and able to create more music and stuff like that. So so best case scenario, you create something amazing that highlights both of your strengths when you're collaborating, and you find a new workflow with someone that kind of surpasses your own. That is the cool, like, to me, that's like the best case scenario, is when you're working with somebody and all of a sudden you're like throwing stuff down really, really quickly, and all the places where you would get hung up is where they excel, and then they throw stuff down real quickly, and then it's just like this back and forth, and you're just able to find the synergy and that does happen. The only way it happens though is trying it out and like finding the right people to kind of collaborate with and stuff. So yeah. All right, Mark, do you want to chime in on that at all, or I'll keep rolling here if not?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add on collaboration. Most of my collaboration these days is with vocalists. So I mean, of course they're doing what I can't do because I'm not a singer. But yes, even as far as producers, I mean, yeah, I was actually listening to a Sync podcast the other day, and they're interviewing this someone who worked at like a trailer house or a trailer publisher. And he was saying he'll even go as far as like if he knows someone is really great at strings and someone else is great at brass, like he will like initiate that collaboration. I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. And it is scary because you got to put yourself out there, like, and you got to pretty much have like a confidence about your own abilities and stuff like that. But it's definitely worth it. It's one of those things that early on I was like, nah, I'm just going to do this on my own. But especially within the last year and a half, I've seen so much value from collaborating, and finding a good kind of workflow and synergy is just one of them. So, all right, number 5 is don't be afraid to take breaks, both short and extended. So I can think of specific times in my journey so far in sync where I was just like banging my head against the wall, and it felt like I was sitting down trying to produce something and nothing was happening. And I was just like, every time I would go sit down, I was just getting more frustrated because it wasn't working out like I expected it to. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be faster. And it was just like making it even worse because I was just feeling like I wasn't getting anything done. So I did the exact opposite of what I felt like I should be doing, which was to stop completely and try to like take my brain off of music, and actually really did help. So sometimes I can recognize when I'm at that point in a very small kind of like micro type scale way. And like if I'm sitting at a project and I'm just hitting a wall and I know I'm not being productive, I'll just stop. I'll literally just close my computer and go do something else, because it's like it's better for me to clear my head and be able to come back and have a better approach later in the day or even tomorrow than to just sit there and get frustrated about it, because I'm just wasting time at that point. Where there, if I get up and just go do something different, there's a good chance that I'll be able to have a whole different perspective, sometimes even immediately, just doing something small. I'll go do the dishes or something like that, and emerge from my man cave and try to be helpful around the house or something for a while, and then come back to it. And then at that point, sometimes things click. Other times I've had to like take a long break, like literally like a whole week off, of just, and obviously you got to be careful. You don't want to like do that when you have a deadline or something like that. Somebody's expecting a track from you. But doing that type of stuff really does kind of help, almost like a palate cleanse, right? Like you just get so inundated, so involved in everything, especially if you're working really hard or doing the real early morning, or late into the evening thing. Finding ways just to get your head out of the mix and then reconnecting a little bit with just kind of your passion and excitement about music in general. There's definitely genres that I've done that feel like are a drain. Like they just, like when you're into your 7th, 8th track or something, doing the kind of the exact same sound, you're like, oh God, why am I doing this? Why did I decide to do this album or whatever? And you feel like, you're the quality is starting to suffer just because you're not excited about it and stuff like that. That's a good opportunity to just take a step back and try to kind of reconnect with some stuff. There's definitely go-to music that I will listen to that has nothing related to production music that I can just kind of enjoy and, try to just recoup a little bit. And usually I've never done that and not come back like with a new sense of like motivation and freshness and kind of, excitement for things. So just going to keep on moving here. Sorry, I'm pulling up my notes.
That's all right. Yeah, while you pull that up, I'll just say too, an analogy that I heard a while ago that seems to be very helpful, and this kind of touching on that. It's like if you think about your 24 hours a day as like literally $24 you have to spend. And I mean, obviously, if you were healthy, like 8 of those are already gone for sleep, whatever. Let's just say you have like 5 left, 4 left for your music. And yeah, if you're burnt out, like think about like the ROI on that money, even as if you're investing it. If you're super burnt out and you're like spending $4, like 4 hours, whatever, and you're getting a very little return, or you take one of those hours, go reset, spend time with your wife or your family, whatever, and then you have 3 hours that are like way more productive, or like whatever the ratio is, like kind of like you said, like just step away. Because yeah, like you might have a deadline and you might think, well, this isn't productive. Well, neither is you sitting in your chair for 4 hours smacking your head on your keyboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
just take a break and do what you need to do to reset so you can come back. I mean, I struggle with this all the time. My wife will constantly tell me like, well, why are you still in your studio? Like you're frustrated. Like just let's watch a TV show or something. Like because when you go in there on a good day, you come out and you're like, oh, I did 4 tracks today. But
Right.
like another day,
Yeah.
I'm like, I got nothing done. Like I hate
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Exactly. That's such a good way to think about it. And like, with the ROI, the return on investment, you're if you're looking at it from a business standpoint, it makes sense to go watch a show. Like, which sounds so backwards, but it really does. Like, what are you going to gain from sitting there and being frustrated? So catching that early on and making the right decision, definitely I think is helpful. And to not feel like I felt guilty about doing that kind of stuff. Like I was like, I'm such a failure. I can't sit here and grind out these tracks. So yeah, being able to do that that's a really great way to think about it, Mark. Um, okay. Number 6, we're still moving. Don't fall into the Lone Ranger mentality, right? The Lone Ranger mentality would be the idea that you are in this on your own and you're going to make it happen by yourself, and you don't have any support system or anyone to talk to or anything like that. The reality is that like sync is frustrating like in so many ways. There's so many really cool things about it. I tell anybody that asks me, like I have people come onto my website, and I set up this like this chat or messaging thing on my website, and I like marketed it for like music supervisors and stuff like that. Not one music supervisor has used it, but a ton of people use it to ask me about like taxi and sync licensing and stuff. So they're always like, should I do this? And now every time somebody asks me about it, I tell them there are major pros and there are major cons, and you need to be prepared for those. One of those is that it can be frustrating when you feel like you're just banging your head against the wall with music and creating what you think might be really, really great stuff, but never seeing those wins and stuff. So that's why it's so important to stay connected to people that are kind of in the same boat as you. And that's honestly one of the reasons why we started the Sinkhole server, is to create a community for people to kind of connect with and bounce off, where they're at in their sync journey and stuff, and just kind of be able to relate to different people. I think it's important to even to take it even a step farther, is find people that are kind of in a similar place in life as you that are trying to do sync. Like if you're a parent or if you're a mom trying to balance, top lining and being, what your kids need at the same time, find other moms that are doing the same thing. If you're a producer, you're working 60 plus hours a week, on your full-time job, and there's a lot of stress, involved. Find somebody else that's kind of in the same boat, and be able to open up about the struggles, and ultimately not just those, but the wins as well as you see things progress. That's super important to be able to share, your victories and stuff like that. The first time I saw a placement, the crazy thing about it is that ultimately it never even resulted in getting paid like in any way. I never saw any royalties whatsoever from my first placement, but I remember sharing that with the taxi community, and the encouragement that I got from, hearing like, wow, that was, it was amazing. It's such a great, story, and how quickly it happened and all that stuff. And so that was really encouraging. That was super motivating. It would have been really cool to have that, just on my own, but sharing it with the community and have community and somebody else coming alongside, encouraging me with all that stuff, made it even that much better, and really kind of helped elevate that in a way that was motivating even more so. So yeah, don't fall into that mindset of you've got to do it by yourself, and that like you're only ever going to be, the one that knows the ins and outs of what's actually happening. I try to talk to my wife about sync music, and most times it's just like I'm speaking, like Greek. There's, it's hard to talk to somebody about sync or music production that isn't in the world of sync, right? So that's why you kind of have to venture out and try to find people that actually know what you're talking about and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, great points. And yeah, relating that to time management, even just understanding that, I mean, kind of like you're touching on, the more people you have in your community, the more you're not going to get to those burnout points, and the more you can, to another whole topic on that. And this was hugely beneficial for me with the taxi community, is like, you like the best way to learn in life is through mistakes, but no one says they have to be your own mistakes. Like I have no idea the amount of years that I've saved because I've learned from mentors' mistakes. Like there's certain things I avoided and like certain mistakes I didn't have to make because other people did and they shared them with me. And I would have never had that without community. If I was just going at this alone, I'd be making all sorts of horrible mistakes and wasting all sorts of time.
Man, I'm gonna seriously write that down. Say that again. You don't have to
Sure.
the
Yeah.
mistakes thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't remember how I worded it exactly. I mean, I've heard it a million times too,
I'll
but
just
it's
go
like
back and watch the video, but
the
yeah,
best, like one of the best ways to learn in life is from mistakes,
right.
but there's no rule that they have to be your
They don't have
mistakes.
to be right. They don't have to be your mistakes. That's good. That's like, I mean, mic drop moment. Seriously, like, I mean, if you're learning from other people and connecting with them, they're gonna hopefully share their experiences in a way that set you up for success, and ultimately, it's gonna be a productivity kind of increase, because you're gonna be able to avoid that stuff. So yeah, that's excellent. Okay, number 7. So far it looks like we're timing this pretty well. It's about 8:47 right now. Number 7, spend time getting to know your tools really, really well. It took me a while to realize this is one of the newer revelations for me, because I definitely fell into, and still to this day fall into, the trap of new shiny things like catching my attention via social media, like promo ads of new sample libraries and new synthesizers and new drum sounds and all this stuff. And like the impulse is just there to go buy something new and be like, oh, this is the answer. Like this is gonna get me everything I need in order to make that next killer track. But the reality is, and I find this consistently, is that like usually we don't, or at least for me, I don't spend as much time as I should learning all the ins and outs of all the tools that I actually have. So literally just like a few days ago, I was doing some kind of creative sound design type stuff for like a project that's like bed technology, bed sort of tracks. So kind of like underscore stuff, not super attention grabbing, more kind of just sitting underneath some dialogue. And I needed some kind of like, I had in my mind, I wanted something kind of ambient, a little bit like texture and stuff like that. And I started playing around with Contact, found one of I think it's the Grandeur, like the piano. It was a cool piano. I always just thought it was just a piano, but then I went in and started playing with like the effects in there, and they got some really killer like ways that they're doing sound design stuff in there with different things, have like almost like a reverse effect and things like that. And it's just, I'd never even known that was there. I'd never had any idea that it was anything more than just a piano sample library. But it wasn't until I actually took the time to sit down and start playing around with it. And now that I have, I know, and I've got that kind of in the back of my head, ready to pull out at any given moment, should I need something, that it calls for that, as opposed to going out and spending 50 or 100 or $150 on another, new instrument. And then never learning that one to its fullest extent or whatever. So yeah, this kind of applies, I think, for regardless of wherever you're at, whether you're a producer, composer, or even a writer. There's different tools that you can use. One of the tools that I actually use is called Songwriter's Companion. That it's just kind of like a way to stay organized with your writing and stuff like that. It's nothing fancy. It just kind of like keeps things organized, but it gives you all the options as far as like, and I'm sure there's a ton of tools out there like this, but all the different tools for like, rhyme schemes or, just different, thesaurus type stuff. So having something like that obviously is going to be really helpful, and knowing it really well. This is another one that actually I hadn't planned on sharing. I'm going to see if I can pull up, but it's called, I think it's called the most dangerous writing app ever, or just the most dangerous writing app. Yeah, so it's just the most dangerous writing app.com. I love this thing when I'm trying to write. I don't do a ton of lyrics, but when I do, this is like an absolutely killer tool to have and to play with, because basically the idea is you hit start and if you stop typing, it deletes everything that you've written. So like it's this weird, cruel way to make sure that you don't stop. Like if you get like if you're stuck, you literally just have to keep typing, otherwise you'll lose everything that you'd done up until that point. So, and then after a certain amount of time, like 5 minutes, then you can copy it and save it and you know, do whatever with it. But excuse me, having tools like that, knowing what they do, having a good sense of when to use and pull out certain tools, really is going to be a big kind of way to make sure that you are staying productive and staying on task with what you're ultimately set out to do and stuff. So definitely worth learning your tools, finding lots of new tools, or just, again, checking out what you do have at your disposal and trying to make the most of them. And, you know, in order to do that, like, at least, again, this is just for me, what I found, you have to like literally be intentional about it. Like you have to say, okay, instead of just going to what I always go to, I have to like take the extra time to go start exploring something. And that does feel counterproductive in the moment because you're spending time searching through things or trying to learn things or watching videos about stuff, you know, but ultimately, you know, think about it like kind of like Mark was saying, the return on investment. If you do end up finding stuff about what you have or ways to utilize what you have in a way that you haven't before, it's going to pay dividends, right? It's going to come back and it's worth the time invested. So, Mark, do you want to chime in on that at all?
Sure. Yeah. First thing, you sparked my interest at the piano effects. That's like one of my favorite things. So like in my template, I have a folder just called sound design goodies. And it's like anytime I find something like that, I'll just throw it in that folder. Cause like
That's awesome.
for me, like sound design stuff or like hybrid cinematic atmospheres, like that's one of the easiest ways to get a track started, or even just like to add that extra weird element to a track. And so at the very top, I have two different, I don't know, I haven't checked out the grandeur. So I have that piano, but I haven't checked out their effects. I'm going to have to look into that. But for me,
Yeah.
it's the Hans Zimmer piano. They have an effects section in that's insane. And then
Yeah.
this the Cinematic Studio Series piano, and both of them, yeah. It's like all these
Yep.
weird scrapes and stuff and like all these crazy sounds. It's just like
Yep.
instantly make your production so much better. But yeah, sound design goodies, that's like my favorite folder in any session because I can just like
Yep.
find all these weird things. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
getting to know your tools too, like in Logic too, I've like I'll set up my own key commands or like memorize key commands. Like I can almost go through an entire session without touching my mouse. And it's just like learning your tools, like learning your key commands and your hotkeys, like how to just do things instantly. And even, yeah,
Absolutely.
learning your tools, like you said, like I've very guilty of that for a long time of just like, oh, I need a new string library because everyone else has it. And my tracks aren't going to sound as good, but like I haven't even put in the time to like memorize all the articulations on the, string libraries I have now. Like I I hear music from people who like they have all the newest string libraries and their music still doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
Like their strings still sound horrible because like they don't know how to work them, But then
Right.
like, and actually, if you watch Anne Catherine Dern, she has a YouTube channel and she's like using this like insanely old sample library from like 2002, and everyone's like, "Oh, I bet it's the new Spitfire." I bet it's like, and it's like, no, it's like this old super cheap sample library that like came on a CD, like, and it has like three
Wow.
velocity levels. Like, it's just not a good like sample library. I mean, it is, but like it's 20 years old, and she, yeah, I mean, she has this whole video. I think it's called The Case for Old Gear. But yeah, it's
Mm.
just like digging deep on your tools and like mastering those instead of like you said, just like, oh, there's a new Spitfire library, oh, there's a new string library, oh, there's this, there's that. Like, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
guilty of that
No.
too.
So like even within, like you were saying, within Logic, it took me probably the first year to start getting actually good with like MIDI. Like I took so much extra time like adjusting like little MIDI notes here and there, and then like, you know, trying to get the velocities and like once I started getting the key commands for that and took the time to look that up, spent the time learning that, then I was like, why did I wait so long? Why,
Yeah.
seriously, why did I not do this way earlier? Because it's so helpful, you know?
Oh yeah.
And now I love that stuff. I'll look for stuff and I'll look for things that'll help me just, you know, that I can kind of, like I said, just put in my back pocket and pull out when I need it and stuff. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep on your radar. I don't think it's something you have to do all the time, but always you just kind of be thinking like, how is there a better way? You know, is there a way to use what I have in a little bit more effective way? So okay. Number 8 is set realistic goals, right? So um it's definitely worth like taking the time to have a good game plan for what you would want to accomplish, short term and long term. The thing about goals for me is that like I try I try not to beat myself up over it if I don't get where I wanted to go early on, because I try to always remember like the point of goals is not to like kill yourself in order to make it happen at all costs. It's to give you a good shooting point, knowing that there's probably going to be things that make you veer off here and there. But if you can get it's just like a target, right? If you aim for nothing, you'll hit nothing. But if you aim for something, you'll probably at least get close to it. For me, what I actually did is I set up in my studio an entire wall of like chalkboard wallpaper that you could basically just write on like with chalk. And I would put like my weekly type goals up there, like what I was trying to accomplish for that week. So it was just kind of always right there. And then I'd be able to, when my kids didn't come down and erase it and draw, smiley faces on it and stuff, I'd be able to see what was going on and have a good game plan for the week. And there's definitely weeks where like I wrote the whole plan up and absolutely none of it happened, right? But there was also plenty of times where it really did help me kind of say, okay, this is where I need to go and stuff. And then I also think it's important to kind of share your goals with others and let them know like this is kind of what I'm working towards. It's a good way to kind of not, well, there's an element of like keeping each other accountable and stuff like that, or checking in. I would say like don't be the guy that like makes somebody, or be the girl that makes somebody like feel terrible when they don't reach their goals. But like I said, use them as a way to encourage, and a way to kind of work towards something, not as another, added level of guilt if you don't quite get to where you wanted to be with them and stuff like that. So as long as they're used in the correct way, I think goals can really be helpful and help you ultimately stay more productive and kind of on the ball as far as where you're going and stuff. So, but yeah. Anything on goals, Mark? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
no, you're good. A few things. I was looking around. I have actually, speaking of it, of one of those productivity planners.
Mhm.
Like they have this like thing in the story in the back. I was trying to find so I could reference it, but I have no idea where it is. That's how productive I am. I lost my productivity planner. But it was this story. I remember
That's organizational, not productivity. So you're good.
It's some company. I know like James Clear talks about this story too, but it's some company like in the 30s or 40s where this guy came in as like a consultant, and he's like, I guarantee I can increase your productivity by whatever percentage. And like, you don't even have to pay me until you see the results. But all he did was like told them like, you're only allowed to focus on one thing per day. And they're like, what do you mean? We have like our to-do list is like dozens of things long. He's like, I promise you, whatever. And the story goes on, and yeah, their revenue increased by like thousands of percent or whatever it was. And it was just a simple idea of like, okay, what's your one thing that you absolutely have to get done today, no exceptions, and then maybe what are two or three more things after that, but you're only allowed to focus on this one thing per day. And like, yeah, their productivity and sales and everything just skyrocketed. And two, on your point of like breaking things down, I mean, this is still something I struggle with too. I go through phases, and like my wife calls me out on this all the time, but like having these giant goals, like say you could have a goal that's 5 years away, okay, but how do you break that down to daily goals? Like how can you make that so stupidly simple that like you can't not succeed? Because like I'll have these giant like gargantuan goals, and then I sit here in my studio and I'm so overwhelmed that I don't do anything, versus why don't you make your goal so stupidly simple? Like, okay, I'm going to sit down, open Logic, and work for 15 minutes. That's my goal. Because once that 15 minutes is done, I blink and it's 3 hours. You know what I mean?
Right.
Versus like, I'm going to write 10 trailer tracks this week, and then I do nothing because I like, well, I can't do that. But I don't know.
No, that's smart. Like I've noticed that too. When my goals are super achievable, it's easy to surpass them, right?
Exactly.
So like you when you get to that point of like, oh, I already did that, but I'm on a roll now. Like I might as well just keep going with this as long as the it's still there or whatever. And so yeah, I think that's a great approach in general, like in setting goals. Don't use it as a way of like, I'm going to set this goal and like kill myself in order to do that. Just set it so that you know that you can accomplish them, and then run with the momentum that you get from kind of doing that. And I think that is super helpful. So this is like, a little bit of a rabbit trail, but every time, Mark, I hear you talk about this stuff, it makes me just want to sit and listen to you talk about this stuff, because I feel like you've got some really, really great insight on these things. And I can tell that you have taken a really good like business model approach to music, which is really cool. And that's super important. I think in general, that isn't on our list or anything like that, but it's important for everybody, especially for creatives, because we come into this and just be like, I want to create beautiful music that inspires people. Well, that's awesome, but you need to have a plan. Like, you got to really be thinking about all these different pieces to it. And I think you do a great job of that, Mark. So last thing on my list, this is the bonus one, and then we'll probably wrap things up. Mindset is everything, right? And this kind of just ties in with what we just said, but don't beat yourself up if it's not perfect. If you create a track, or if you create a song or whatever, try to stay positive about it. Think about it as like a learning process. Even if it doesn't go great, even if you get to the end of it and you're like, well, this did not work out like I wanted to, think of it as that is the stepping stone to which you will be able to achieve greatness later on, right? When you get to that point of finishing something, putting a stamp of approval on it, even if it's not exactly what you wanted it to be, know that it can be something later down the road that you look back on and be like, oh, I remember doing that, and I learned this, this, and this, and this from. And as long as you're keeping that long-term mindset, it's going to be something that helps you long-term as well. So, yeah. So any closing thoughts? I think we're going to try to close this out in just a second for the video side. And then anybody that wants to hang out on Zoom or chat or talk about different projects they're doing, we'd love to talk to you guys about that. It'd be great just to catch up for a little bit. But Mark, any kind of closing thoughts before we actually end the video side of things?
Well, yeah, first off, I just don't want to cut you off, but thank you for the kind words. I'm very flattered. That's very nice for you to say. But I will say anything wise that I say is not my own. Like, I've spent a lot of time studying this stuff, and it was out of necessity. Like, I'm not naturally wired this way. I did what I thought was a responsible thing, and like went to music school, and then graduated with an insane, absolutely insane amount of student loan debt, and like realized like, okay, I need to figure this out. Like, I thought I was doing like the smart thing based on what society and my guidance counselor in high school told me, but now I'm like, I have to work like 80-hour weeks and like figure out how I'm going to climb out of this. So I just like, for the past whatever 8 years, I've just I mean, I realized very early on that like you have to treat this like a business. I didn't have those skills naturally. I mean, I mowed lawns in high school and stuff, so like I know how to run a business, but like I'm not business minded, but just by studying this stuff for years and just studying people who are far wiser than me and finding the right mentors. I mean, yeah, anything I say, attribute it to someone else. Like that's just,
no, that's good. I mean, that's the best way to do it, right? Like, learn from somebody else's mistakes, like you said. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up the video side of it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. Like I said, you feel free to stick around just a minute if you want to chat. But we will plan on picking up our next topic sometime next month, probably later in the month. And yeah, appreciate everybody being here, everybody watching on YouTube and all that stuff as well. So we will see you guys next month.